This is the staff user guide for internal assessment. You can access the AIM system using the URL provided, www.vcsgrants.communities-ni.gov.uk. In this presentation, we will look at the internal assessment by the development officer, how to approve the project by the line manager, and senior approval. Previous decks have managed and explained the edit application and submit application stages. To start, we will look at internal assessment by the development officer. When the chairperson or director has submitted the application, the development officer is notified by email that they have been assigned the internal assessment task. To complete the task, the development officer clicks on the Internal Assessment CED or VCD button that appears under the Task column in the Upcoming Tasks window. This will then display the application processing screen. On the right-hand side of this screen, the Activities tab can be found, and it is broken down into three sections: the To-Do section, with activities that need to be completed; a Done section, which displays activities once they are completed; and Not Applicable, which is not relevant for this training manual. To complete the internal assessment form, click the blue arrow button next to the second task. This will open the internal assessment form, Section 1, Part 1. You will see in the form header there are documents available to download, guidance documents for reference only, the Delegated Authority Approval Arrangements, and the Evidence Aid Memoir. Starting on the first tab of our form, Project Assessment, we can see a list of questions. Question 1.1, Project Information. This is auto-populated. Question 1.2, to confirm that I reviewed the application. This is a mandatory field. To review the full application or additional files, use the Documents tab of the application. This will be displayed in slide 5. If 1.2 is answered no, all of the questions are disabled. Question 1.3. This is also a mandatory field. Has the applicant clearly demonstrated organizational capacity? If no, provide an explanation. A question is displayed. Question 1.4, again a mandatory field. Does the application clearly align with criteria and objectives? If no, then provide an explanation question will be displayed. Moving on to question 1.5, again a mandatory field. For VCS, have the organization's accounts and financial statements been fully reviewed? If no, provide an explanation in the box that will appear. Question 1.6, again a mandatory field. For VCS, does the current financial position demonstrate that there is a need for financial assistance? If no, then the provide an explanation question will be displayed. Similarly, for 1.7, a mandatory field. Was the proposal funded during the previous financial year, 25-26? Again, if no, then the text box question will be displayed to provide an explanation. Question 1.8 is a mandatory field for statutory organizations only. If no, provide an explanation. For statutory organizations, is there an up-to-date delegated responsibility template completed? And then finally, in this section, question 1.9, also a mandatory field. Has there been any changes to the project from the previous year's application? If yes, then the provide an explanation question will be displayed. The follow-up question, if yes, are you content that the changes are in line with the program outcome? That question will then be displayed also. And if no, provide an explanation question is displayed. Continuing in section 1, question 1.9 was not the last question. We see this question 1.10, again a mandatory field. Is there a change in the amount requested for salary costs? If yes, given this change, is the organisation able to continue to meet the outcomes and objectives of the funding programme? That question will be displayed. If yes, then a provide an explanation question will also be displayed. This is the same for question 1.11. Again, a mandatory field. Is there a change in the amount requested for running costs? If yes, given this change, is the organisation able to continue to meet the outcomes and objectives of the funding programme? And then if yes to that question, provide an explanation in the box displayed. Question 1.12, a mandatory field. Is there a change in the amount requested for programme costs? As before, given this change, is the organisation able to meet the outcomes and objectives of the funding programme? And if yes, provide an explanation. Question 1.13, mandatory field. Has the organisation clearly established their exit strategy and how the project will be funded once the funding ends? If no, please provide an explanation. Question 1.14, a mandatory field. Has the need for the project been clearly established? Yes or no answers. Provide an explanation field is always displayed. Question 1.15, a mandatory field. Would the project proceed without the funding applied for? Again, a yes or no drop-down menu to select the response and provide an explanation field, which is always displayed. Question 1.16, 1.16. Has the applicant stated that they have received or are due to receive funding from other sources for this project? If yes, have you reviewed the uploaded document? Question will be displayed. And if yes, provide an explanation question will be displayed. Question 1.17, a mandatory field. Have the project costs been clearly established? The provide an explanation field will always be displayed. Question 1.18, has value for money been clearly demonstrated? Another mandatory field. And an explanation box will always be displayed here as well. Question 1.19, a mandatory field. Will all monitoring processes be applied in line with program procedures? The provide an explanation box will always be displayed for this question. That is the last question in section 1. To move to the next section of our form, click on the Save Draft and Continue button. This moves us into section 2 of the form, Financial Recommendation. Again, within the header, you can see the guidance documents that are available to download. We look at the questions within that section. We start with 2.1, Recommended Project Costs. Click the link, Review Project Costs, to review the project costs. The project cost review is explained in the next slides. Question 2.2 is a mandatory field. Do you recommend the project is approved and funding can be allocated? And if yes, select the Schedule Payments to be Added question is displayed. Once this section of the form is completed, click Save Draft and Continue to move to the next section. Before we do that, we will look at the project costs review. The project cost displays the Overview tab by default. It includes a high-level list of all project costs pre-populated from the application. To review and edit individual project costs, use the tabs on the left, explained in the next slides. At this stage, the project cost status is requested. Below is a list of the flexible costs pre-populated from the application. Click on the Add button to create a new project cost. Click on the Delete button to delete an existing project cost from the screen. Press the Save button to save all changes to the project costs, or press Cancel to close the tab without saving the changes and return to the Overview tab. We have underlined the note here. Make sure you save your changes before moving on to the next Project Costs tab. You can see we have the overview, then flexible costs, program costs, running costs, salaries, and project cost history. Highlighted here, we see where we have to save before we move on to the next tab. Below is a list of the program costs pre-populated from the application. Again, click on the Add button to create a new project cost. Click on the Delete button to delete an existing project cost from the screen. Press the Save button to save any changes to project costs, or press the Cancel button to close that tab without saving the changes, and you will automatically return to the overview. Again, make sure you save your changes before moving on to the next Project Cost tab. Now we see the running costs pre-populated from the application. As before, click the Add button to create a new project cost, Delete button to delete an existing cost, and the Save button to make sure all changes have been saved for project costs. The Cancel button will close the tab without saving any of the changes and return you to the Overview tab. And finally, with salaries, we can see the list of salary costs pre-populated from the application. The same structure applies: the Add button to create a new project cost, the Delete button to delete an existing cost, and the Save button to save all changes to the project costs, or the Cancel button to close the tab without saving changes and return to the Overview tab. Once the individual project costs have been reviewed and edited, click on the Overview tab. Next, click the Recommend button, highlighted in the screen below, and it will update the project cost status from requested to recommended, and will bring the user back to the internal assessment form. Once the project costs have been reviewed and you've returned to the assessment form, you will see question 2.2, the mandatory field. Total yearly recommended amount for 26-27 question has been updated with the recommended amount from the project costs. If yes, select the schedule payments to be added. Question will be displayed. This brings us to Save Draft and Continue, and we continue to section 3, part 1. 3.1 is a recommended funding summary of the project costs that has been auto-populated. Question 3.2, we see the contribution to salary costs. Enter the subtotal of the salary costs for the relevant period, e.g. 1/4 of total salary costs for April to June. Click on the Save Details button to save the entry. A new blank row will be automatically added. You can ignore the blank row. Click on the Delete button to delete any entry as required. You must save the entry below by clicking on the Save Details button before moving on to the next question. Question 3.3. Contribution to running costs. Again, enter the subtotal of the running costs for the relevant period. Enter 0 for the first quarter, April to June. Click on the Save Details button to save the entry, and a new blank row will be automatically added. Click on the Delete button to delete any entry as required. You must save the entry below by clicking on the Save Details button before moving on to the next question. Question 3.4. Contribution to program costs. Again, the subtotal of the program costs for the relevant period need to be entered. Enter 0 for the first quarter from April to June. Click on the Save Details to save the entry. A new blank row will automatically appear. Click on the Delete button to delete any entry as required. You must save the entry below by clicking on the Save Details button before moving on to the next question. Then we come to Section 4, Internal Assessment. Question 4.1. A mandatory question. Development Officer's approval. There is a tick box statement here. After entering towards the total government expenditure of, towards the total NI public expenditure of, save the draft to recalculate, and the total project costs of. Use the Save Draft button as it appears on screen. After reviewing Section 4, you can then click Save Draft and Continue, or Save Draft and Exit, which will bring the user to the form submission page. On the form submission page, click Yes to complete the form and continue to next steps. Having submitted the form and returned to the application processing screen, we can see there is the activity. The internal assessment form is completed and has moved into the Done section of the Activities panel. Then we look at next steps. Select the Approval Manager, CED or VCD, to be assigned to the next task by selecting the user from the drop-down list provided. Then click Send to Line Manager for project approval. We will now look at the Approve Project task by the Line Manager. After the Development Officer submits the internal assessment, the Line Manager is notified by email that they have been assigned an Approve Project CED or VCD task. To complete the task, the Line Manager clicks on Approve Project, the button in their task column in Upcoming Tasks, which displays on the applications, which will then display the application processing screen. On the right-hand side of the screen, the Activities panel can be found and is broken down into 3 sections. The To-Do section, with activities that need to be completed. The Done section, which again displays activities once these are completed and not applicable. Looking at the items in the To-Do section, we see to review the internal assessment form, click the blue arrow button next to the internal assessment, and a Word document version of the form is downloaded to the user's machine. Review the form, then click the green tick to mark this activity as completed. For project approval, to complete the project approval form, click the blue arrow button next to the second task. Once the Line Manager downloaded, reviewed, and marked the internal assessment form as complete, the task is moved to the Done section of to-do activities. Under the to-do list, there is one more task to be completed, the project approval form. Click the blue arrow button next to the task to open the form. Project approval has one section. The project information 1.1 is auto-populated. 1.2 recommended project costs again is auto-populated. Question 1.3, it's a mandatory field, line manager's approval. There's a tick box statement. And the question, do you approve of this project? If yes, the funding table is displayed. If no, then a question is displayed where you can provide explanation comments for the development officer. Question 1.4, is the senior approval required? A mandatory field. There's a note to review the Delegated Authority Approval Arrangements document. And the question, yes or no? If yes, then the box to provide explanation comments for senior approver is displayed. In the scenario that the senior approver sent it back to the line manager, the senior approver comments will be displayed here. When completed the project approval form, you can click on Save Draft and Continue or Save Draft and Exit, which will bring the user to the form submission page. Here, click Yes to complete form and continue next steps. This will then return you to the application processing screen where you can approve the project. Both tasks, the internal assessment review and the project approval form, are now complete and moved to the Done list. Under Next Steps, we have a number of options. Select the senior approver to be assigned to the next task by selecting the user from the drop-down list available. Only if Send to Senior Approver for review is clicked. Then click Project Approved if the project is approved, or click Send to Senior Approver for review if the project requires extra approval. There's also the option to send back to Development Officer for internal assessment and to send it back to the Development Officer for amendments. Note this will restart the internal assessment process. If the line manager sends the application to the senior approver for review, the senior approver is notified by email that they've been assigned a senior approval task. To complete that task, the senior approver clicks on the senior approval button on the task column in the upcoming tasks portal, which will then display the application processing screen. And again, on the right-hand side, we have the activities panel with the to-do section for activities that need to be completed. To review the internal assessment form, click the blue arrow button next to the internal assessment, and a Word document version of the form is downloaded to the user's machine. Review the form, then click the green tick to mark this activity as completed. To complete the senior approval form, click the blue arrow button next to the second task. Again, once the senior approver downloaded, reviewed, and marked the internal assessment form as complete, the task is moved to the Done section. The remaining activity to be completed is the senior approval form. Click the blue arrow button next to the task to open the form. Here we can see there's a single section to this form. Again, 1.1 is auto-populated with project information. 1.2, recommended project costs. 1.3 Line Manager's comments. These will be auto-populated with the line manager's comments when they requested senior approval. Question 1.4. Do you approve this project? If that's a yes, then question 1.5 is enabled. If no, then a question box will be displayed for you to provide explanation comments for the line manager. So with a yes, question 1.5 was enabled. This is the senior approval with a checkbox to be ticked. Once that is complete, you can click Save Draft and Continue or Save Draft and Exit, which will bring you to the form submission page. On the form submission page, click Yes to complete form and continue to next steps. When both tasks are done, the internal assessment review and the senior approval form, it will be moved to the Done section of the Activities panel, and you can look at next steps. We have the option to click Project Approved if the project is approved, or if not approved, click Send back to Line Manager for review. This will restart the approved project stage.